Hello, and welcome to another episode of Foggy with a Chance of Seagulls. My name, as always, is Clark. I am joined, as always, by my pal Evan. The Giants have won back-to-back series, haven't dropped a series since they were in Tampa, Florida, or more accurately, St. Petersburg. Giants are on a bit of a roll. Evan, how we doing?
Clark, I'm doing great. We're recording in the morning here. The energy is up. Between you and I, personally, my energy is down in regards to the fact that I ran a half marathon on Sunday, and I'm feeling positively ready to get my AARP card today. Feeling arthritic, feeling every joint bark at me as I move around, but feeling good and excited to talk some Giants baseball here with you today. I hear that there's reports of a great white sighting. Is that right?
Great white sighting. Yes, what Evan is so expertly transitioning into is I was telling him before we hopped on here, I have a Mitch White connection, which for Giants fans out there who are not necessarily reloading MLB trade rumors every day like the two psychos who are recording right now. The Giants signed last week Mitch White, or it might have been actually a week and a half ago now. Mitch White from the Blue Jays after they DFA'd him to make room for their closer, Jordan Romano, who came off the IL. Mitch White came up with the Dodgers and has been pitching with the Blue Jays, has started most of his career, but I think we're using him in the bullpen. Kind of unsure what his role looks like, but I found out yesterday that his grandmother is staying at the same retirement home as my girlfriend's grandmother, and that they've bonded. And shout out Bachan, who is Amanda's 95-year-old grandmother,
Shout out.
who is the biggest Giants fan that I know. And I think it's pretty cool that she gets to chop it up and talk ball with a Giants player's grandmother. So, yeah, nice little cute story
really
to start our episode.
That's really sweet. I feel like Mitch White is one of those, like, you know, that Key and Peele sketch, the Continental Breakfast sketch, where he's like, it finishes and it's like the picture of him having been there for years and years and years. I feel like Mitch White is like that, like with all the other like former Dodgers that Farhan has brought in over the years. Yeah. He's always been here. Has it been a week or has it been a year or 2 years? Just classic.
Exactly.
That's really sweet.
I
hope that she spills the tea.
Yeah. Well, I hope Mitch White finds a role. How about the Giants starting pitching?
Wow. I mean, is it 2024 or is it 2012? I mean, we're
2012.
2020. You know why? So that is because we were having a conversation this weekend. My mom and my brother and his fiance came out for the half, and we were talking about Coney 2012 and that whole thing. And I think that the rhythm of Coney 2012 got in my head. So 2012. But so is it 2024 or 2012? I feel like we kind of are in a time machine back to a vintage of Giants baseball I have not tasted in many years. I mean, it's been so fun to just like see the final lines at the end of every game. And dare I say, all the pitchers kind of doing it in a somewhat similar way. I'm almost like eerily so.
Yeah. I saw this thing. It was the top 5 ground ball rates among starting pitchers in baseball. And the Giants have 3 of the top 5. And I don't think either of us are surprised by that, having both watched, but also kind of understanding what the repertoire of these guys is. Obviously, Logan Webb is up there, but Jordan Hicks is right there with him. And then Keaton Wynn, who had a really impressive week. And I want to talk more about him in a little bit. But yeah, all 3 of those guys are just pounding the strike zone, getting guys to hit it into the ground. And then our elite infield defense is just gobbling up everything. And it's just, and that is also what reminds me of 2012 is having just a really good infield. I mean, we have not had good infield defense for years, and it's amazing what it looks like. I've gone to a few games. We talked about it in the last episode, but that's the thing that just stands out so much when I'm in person is just how good and how easy everything looks for every player defensively. And we haven't talked a ton, I don't think, about Tyro Estrada, but I just was blown away by some of his defense this week. And, Chapman and Ahmed as well. But
Yeah, I mean, this week really made me think back to when we signed Chapman and Webb immediately was like, this changes the game for me. I mean, I'm going to be pitching to contact even harder than before. And I think we're seeing that the other pitchers are following in Webb's footsteps very much so. And it's funny, I feel like I've just happened to see Chapman's few errors this year, but obviously, like, he's 99% of the time, you just know that he's going to make a play, and even the plays you don't think that he's going to make, he makes. Ahmed and Estrada are tied for the most outs above average in the league right now, which is, defensive metrics are kind of neither here nor there, but I think
but
it
it
speaks
matches the
to,
eye test. That's the
yes.
thing that's important too.
And I think it's like, no hate on Giants true legend Brandon Crawford, but you go over there and you look at what he's able to do defensively and what Nick Ahmed has been able to do, and it's like it's no contest, and Ahmed's involved all the time, and it's not just the infield defense too. The outfield defense has also been great as well,
Yeah.
and the way that we're getting beat is on the offensive side, not the pitching side. We're not like shooting ourselves in the foot,
Yeah.
so it's been really really fun to watch. But speaking of fun to watch, this week was I last week my hope was for a 500 week. We very much surpassed that. Took two apiece from the Mets and the Pirates, and I don't know how much more we can ask for from a week of Giants baseball. If the identity is 2012, then just full send it. But as we discussed going into the week, the Mets and the Pirates, the Mets particularly were on a heater. People
Mhm.
still are pretty high on the Mets right now. Reed Garrett and all of that, but and the Pirates too, they're nothing to slouch on. But I think that there was a chance for a lot of narratives, negative narratives, that we're able to quiet for this week, which is really good to see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it just like you said, going into this past week, last week on our show, we were saying, we'd love to just win each series, right?
Yeah.
And we're at home. Both of these teams are pretty much right, kind of in line with us. And we did our business. We took the first two against the Mets, had a bullpen game that didn't go so well, which I was in attendance for. I've been in attendance for the two worst like blowouts so far. Thank God I'm also there for the Patrick Bailey 4-for-4 bobblehead day and another good win. But then the Pirates series, just taking 2 out of 3, those games were super close. You've mentioned, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it, I think, later in the pod, but the offense didn't really show up a ton. It was basically kind of a few homers here and there, which honestly is reassuring to see that we do have that power.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the biggest moment of that Pirate series was seeing Bailey hit the walk-off homer, who just has a real like tendency to have big hits. And I'm starting to really have kind of Max Kellerman saying, I want Iguodala vibes from him. Um, that I want Bailey in the clutch. But yeah, I thought it was also very fitting that Patty Barrels hit that walk-off homer right in front of Joey Bart catching. Sometimes baseball's a little on the nose.
Bart came up in a big situation late in that game
Yeah,
too, I
against
think.
Camilo. Hmm.
And it was just like the fucking narratives, like it just there's so many of these former Giants on the Pirates. It's like,
Oh
who's
yeah.
gonna make us regret everything? Is it gonna be Brian Reynolds? Is it gonna be Connor Joe? Is it gonna be Joey Bart? Like, is it gonna be Andrew McCutcheon? Like, I don't know, there's so
Don't
many
forget
guys.
Giants legend Andrew McCutcheon.
Exactly. I
Um,
never will. We'll never forget that walk off against the Dodgers. But things go a little bit differently, and one of those guys burns us, and we're feeling a lot differently. But
yeah.
um, Reynolds thankfully swung through that. pitch that
That
hit
Ryan
him.
Walker. Oh
Thank
my
you very
God, that
much.
was
I was watching
filthy.
that, my heart in my chest, and I was like, well, there it goes. But Kipe knew it immediately, even though I didn't. And yeah, I
Actually,
mean,
real
just
quick shout out on that note, because I saw a video of the Pirates broadcast being confused because, as you're saying, it was a very strange moment. For those who weren't watching, Ryan Walker throws, I think it was a 3-2 slider that literally, it was a back foot slider that hit Brian Reynolds in the back foot, and he swings through it, but the ball goes away. It shoots off into our dugout. And so there's kind of this panic of like, who's going to get the ball, where are people running, yada yada. And Kipe is just on it immediately. There's no base for Reynolds to go to, so he's out, and there are 2 outs, inning over. Um, but you know, the Pirates broadcast, and I think just in general, you see ball and kind of people scrambling, and I love to take a moment just to shout out how good Dwayne Kuiper is, because he just makes it look easy, but those moments I think are really representative of his just skill and ability. So anyway, minor
yeah. I
interruption to just shout out a legend.
No, always shouts out to the legend and to all the Ford Frick voters who are listening to this podcast.
Yeah, no,
Put Kipe and Kruk in together. You can
yeah,
fucking do it. It's a made up thing. You can just do it. They deserve it. But yeah, man. I mean, it was a great week for Giants baseball. I actually like got to catch a lot more of it this week than usual. Got to watch some when my family was in town, and just I because I was prepping for the half, I went to sleep on Friday night in the like eighth
oh,
inning before the Bailey walk off, which they definitely let me hear about afterwards. But it's I don't know, just like it all starts from the starters and I know that we talked about them a little bit already, but it's the thing that you look at now with these guys, Wynn stepping up, Hicks stepping up, Harrison stepping up, etc., is like how many innings are we going to get? It really
yeah,
becomes the question because the quality is so high. I think I'm already at a place, or fans I think are already at a place where we're taking Hicks for granted, low key, and it's like this is I don't know, like I was just also reading something about the best like starting pitching values thus far from free agents from Levi Weaver and Ken Rosenthal. Um, and on the list, it's like three of like the top values are Seth Lugo, Reynaldo Lopez, and Jordan Hicks, all relievers converted to starters. And you know when you look at it, the way it all played out last year with Wynn and Harrison in terms of the amount of innings they were supposed to get. They were supposed to be ramped up to more, but then injuries derailed. But then functionally, you know, they like had relievers amount of innings last year too. So
right.
we're kind of, you know, faced with that similar thing across the board. But it's a good problem to have. I mean, I hope that it still is a discussion in a few months' time when some other pitchers start to like come back on the board for us.
Yeah, I want to put a pin in that real quick and just mention. I think it's so telling, and I love it personally as someone who is always critical of people's kind of like excitement and buzz over the off season. There were so many posts I saw on Twitter in like January that were like, if Farhan doesn't sign Bellinger, Chapman, and Snell, he doesn't take this seriously. Da 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 da. And if you look and it's like Bellinger's hurt, Snell's hurt, Chapman's been fine, but the true like difference maker free agents have been, like you said, Seth Lugo, Reynaldo Lopez, and Jordan Hicks. And so I think we need to take just a lesson from this and remember that baseball is
Yeah.
random. Past performance does not does not, foretell future performance. Um, and I think also, like you said, just appreciate that Jordan Hicks has been one of the best pitchers in baseball. And while you and I were very high on him, and kind of understanding the track record of our own pitching development, appreciating the stuff that he brought to the table, I'm still blown away by how good he is. And this goes to Win, and I think we really need to appreciate Logan Webb as kind of a leader of this group, because they've
Yeah.
all kind of taken on his personality on the mound. That's like,
Hmm.
oh, they get a hit. All right, well, you'll ground into a double play. And it was
Yeah.
amazing watching. I watched a little bit of Sunday's game before I had to leave, and then I watched some highlights when I came back. And it was like, Win walks a guy, and then it's like, oh, be nice to get a double play here. And then the next pitch is grounded right to shortstop and flipped over and da da da. So it's just, yeah, um, yeah, it's fun to watch them.
Yeah.
It is fun
Love
to
it.
watch them.
Love it. I'm smelling something in the air though. I think it might be a new segment that we established next week. Could it
Let's
be?
talk about it.
Exactly. Who are we talking about this week?
The first person I want to talk about is a favorite of Foggy the Chance of Seagulls, Tyler Fitzgerald. We have
Ooh.
not really focused on him much this season, but I am so excited by what he brings to this team because we haven't really had this. We were talking, I think, last week about how he kind of resembles the role that Mauricio Dubon was playing for us for a couple years there, but Fitzgerald brings so much more speed, even a little bit more positional versatility,
Yeah.
a little bit more power, though not as much contact. But Fitzgerald on Sunday went 3 for 3. He had a bloop double that was one of the most impressive things I've seen, where he hits a pop up, throws his bat down in frustration, and then Reynolds and O'Neill Cruz, it just falls right in between them, and they throw it to second base, and Fitzgerald is just sliding into second base. And I think that represents so much of who he is. Maybe not the most consistent hitter, but
Yeah.
he can
But
leverage so many other things into success for us. And that speed is something that no one else on the team quite has. I mean, he's in the 99th percentile in baseball and sprint speed. The dude can fly.
I was watching it live and I thought that it was Yaz waiting to see if it was going to get caught and then he got hung up at second. I didn't even consider the possibility that it was Fitzgerald getting to second after the way he reacted on TV and everything. It just didn't seem like a thing, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an old sports trope, kind of just like a young Energizer Bunny type player. And I think he brings that gear to this team that's like can be very just professional, go about your work, do things the right way, don't go too extreme in any direction. And I think the Dubon comparison is apt because that's definitely what he did, kind of flailing around in a Jordan Poole style way. That's like, you take the good with the bad. But I think when we talked about him before, I was like, put him anywhere. And you're like, yeah, but it doesn't really make sense. And I mean, I'm honestly not
Toot
usually
that
right
horn,
on this
Evan.
podcast, but I will be tooting it. I think that he really, we talked about concerns about his infield defense, but I watched him play short and was really impressed that the arm was playing. And
He
I
made
don't know,
some
it's
really
like,
good plays on Sunday.
yeah, and just the fact that you can throw him in the outfield, in the infield, on the mound, like anywhere you need him, he'll go and do his best, and just really use that athleticism, which I think is also, um, it's so what Farhan and the front office want to do as far as this team
Yeah.
move in an athletic direction, and I think that he really brings that. So shout out to him. And even though that there's some concerns with the hitting, I mean his average is right around 300 right now or something like that, right? I mean
Yeah.
the power's not huge, but um, with his speed, if he can just get on base, just set it up for somebody else, providing a little bit of a lift at the bottom of the lineup, I think that that's such a great place for him to be. And I I'll admit this is Alex Pavlovich's opinion, but I'd love to see him really take on that Chris Taylor comp all the way and build up the amount of games played where it's for whoever, spell Lee for a day, spell Ahmed, spell
Yep.
Tyro, he's proved really valuable. And I think it's really slowing down Marco's process to the big leagues in a good way. Honestly,
In a
the
very good
fact that
way.
he's
Yeah.
capable of handling short means that we're not going to reactionarily pull the trigger as soon as Margot hits his second homer of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I've just been really, really impressed by him. So I'm glad
Yeah.
to have
Well,
him to talk about.
you mentioned when we were talking about the Mets and kind of the like buzz around them, you mentioned the name Reed Garrett, who's been a phenomenal reliever for him. And Fitzgerald hit a home run off him in that 8-2 game that we lost. And like obviously kind of a throwaway game. We're not going to think too much about it, but he started in center field for Lee and hit a homer. And it's like being able to just come in and like you said, and again, credit to Alex Pavlovich, who has said this on Giants Talk, but um, just having a guy who, okay, you need a rest day for Lee. Okay, you need a rest day for Ahmed. Okay, you need a rest day for Tyro. And then in a week, Fitzgerald gets 3 starts, but none of them are going to be at the same position. I just think that is such, and I've talked about this with like Austin Slater and Wilmer last week too, of like these guys being able to pinch hit and be effective pinch hitters is such a hard
Yeah.
skill within baseball. And I think the spot start and utility player role is so hard. And Fitzgerald so far this year has just made it look really easy. And so that's why I wanted to shout him out in our first. Yeah.
And I have one more thing to add on him before we move on, which is in our weekly shout out to Roger Munter. I feel like he, who has the There Are Giants blog and podcast. I feel like he's opened my mind to the value of makeup in players because he
Mm,
gets a lot of face time with these guys, and I think since the offseason he's talking about how much he loves Fitzgerald's character, his makeup, his work ethic, and all those things. And I think for this type of this modern Swiss Army knife type player, makeup is such a big part of it. I mean, you look at somebody like the insane year that Mookie's having right now on shortstop after being a second baseman, after being a right fielder, just being like a baseball player. And I think
yeah.
part of that is the humility to take your at bats when they come, play the position that they write for you on the lineup card, and just do the best that you can. And I think that he really exemplifies that. So I really love to see it.
It's a great shout out. Who would you like to talk about next?
I would like to talk about Mike Yastrzemski. I think, you know, to say that we weren't worried early would be false. I was a little bit worried. But you see what he's been doing the last few days, just really turning it on. The power's coming back. The defense never slumped throughout it all.
Mm-hmm.
And you really look at it and you go, yeah, he had a kid. He really did have a kid.
Yas Queen. Sorry.
I need that on the soundboard. But it's just like I was reading Bag's article about
Mm-hmm.
him today because they're returning to Fenway tonight in Boston, obviously where Carl Yastrzemski, his dad, was a legend. And it's honestly wild to reflect on, that moment that happened didn't seem so far away, but that was 2019,
5 years ago.
5 years
That's
ago,
unbelievable.
pre-pandemic, pre-Melvin, pre all these different things. And
Pre
he
Kapler.
pre-Kapler, yeah, I
That
mean,
was Bochy
and
was still our manager.
yeah. And when you like really think about it and you think about what Yaz has been for this team, yes,
Yeah.
he will hit slumps here and there, but man, like we ask for baseball players really is consistency. And I think you look at his numbers over time and they're pretty consistent. I think when when he's not dealing with like physical stuff and health things, he just always shows up and is such a professional baseball player. And also like, right now, Patty Barrels might be the clutch guy, but like Yaz is sneaky clutch.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
And
like
has
I
been.
feel like
Yeah.
yeah, and Yasbin. I mean, he's been that guy. I mean, I have so many. I went the other day. I just went on a binge of like big hits that he had throughout his Giants
Mm.
career, like big walk offs and big moments. And he's been a part of so many. Seeing how many different players were on the field with him, like the celebration in 2022 or whatever, like just like so many different iterations of this team. and I think he brings such a stabilizing force to this team. And he's not going to be like your main leader, but he is one of those guys that I feel like people look to see how he plays the game. And to all the haters, I say, back off.
Yeah. You got to toot your horn in the last talk about. I'm going to toot my horn on this one.
Toot it
Specifically,
and boot
shout
it.
out my father, who I'm sure is listening. But he was concerned texting me about Yaz 2 weeks into the year. And I was like, if there's anyone to give time to, it's Yastrzemski. He has shown it. And like you said, the defense never slumps. And I'm
Yeah.
so impressed. I'm so impressed with his ability to just make some of the most impressive plays, but they aren't diving catches. They aren't like you will never see them in highlight reels. I don't know if you saw in Grant's article. I don't know if it was his recap
Yeah,
of
the
the
weekly
week or if
recap
it was one of the. It
of
was
that
the
playing
weekly
right.
recap.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he cuts it off and throws it into second, and it's like he takes what should have been a 1-0 game in the first inning and and you know keeps it from or keeps a run from scoring in that moment, and then our pitching staff is able to do it does. And I think I've seen that in a couple of games I've gone to where he makes a great play in the first inning that's like part positioning, part just throwing to the cutoff man. It's nothing that's like he makes a dive and you're like, wow, what a play. And I feel like Jung Hoo Lee has a lot of plays where he's flying around and you watch him make a catch and you're like, oh, what an outfielder. And not to take anything away from Lee, but like I just think Yastrzemski's ability to make those look so simple is not appreciated until you just watch him play all the time. And yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I think like it's kind of, as an outfielder, I feel like there's two different ways you can kind of approach it. You can approach
Mm-hmm.
it in the Kevin Pillar way. Do you know what I mean? Where it's very
Yeah.
flashy,
Mm-hmm.
where you see the play, and I love that. I love watching that as a fan, too.
Yep.
But I think maybe just
Also
because
member of
I'm
that 2019 Giants team.
true, true. And we were like, he's got to come back, and no.
Yeah.
But maybe just because I was looking at this just now, but I always like, for me, when I think about Bonds, like one of the first things I think about is his outfield defense. And
Yeah.
obviously it's not like he was a defensive wonder kind or whatever. I mean, at his peak, yes, but it always impressed me in the latter half of his career how much he like talked about, like, the emphasis is just on routes and getting rid of the ball as quickly as possible. It's not flashy, but it's just like you do what you can to, to help your team win. And I feel like Yaz is that. It's never flashy, but part of part of that comfort and the reason why I think he's able to make such good decisions quickly in pressure situations is because he's had 5 years to patrol out there in right field,
Yeah.
which is a notoriously hard place to master as a defender for a Giants player, or definitely people that come in on the road. And he just is so comfortable out there, and it shows. And honestly, I think it rubs off on the rest of the outfield too. Conforto's
Completely
made some
agree.
sneaky good plays
I've
recently
really
as
liked his
well.
defense in left field. And we talked about that going into the year of like Conforto is more of a left fielder. I thought, it made sense. We had Haniger and Conforto. I think Conforto is a better outfielder between the two, but being
Yeah,
able to put Lee in center, Yaz moves to right, Conforto moves to left, has that kind of downstream effect that we were talking about when Jung Hoo Lee
hmm
signed. And we're seeing it play out. I'm always so impressed by Yastrzemski's positioning in right field. He
yeah,
plays so far into Triple's alley, and he basically shuts off Triple's alley from other teams. And he has the speed awareness and kind of understanding of our right field to also be able to make plays down the line, which is that play I was referring to in the Pirates series. So it's just,
yeah.
yeah, I love that you shouted him out because I am so happy for him because he's a great Giant, has been a great Giant. He leads the charge on the Mustache May charity and just kind of overall vibes that we're about to see coming up this month with Austin Slater as well involved in that. But yeah, shout out Mike Yastrzemski.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any other guys that you want to shout out?
Quick shout out. We're talking a little bit about our ground ball pitchers, but I wanted to shout out Kyle Harrison a little bit.
Mm,
This is going to be more of a brief shout out, but um, I saw a lot of Giants fans on Twitter, which anytime I'm referencing the opinions of people online, I, take whatever is said with a grain of salt. Um, but I saw people starting to say he's a reliever. He's a one pitch reliever and only has a fastball. And the Giants are basically, it's revealed that he's not a starting pitcher. And it's like, this kid's 22. All right. So, A, chill. And B, I think you really are misunderstanding how impressive his season has been if you're looking at him through kind of the scope of what he's been showing.
mm-hmm.
Because what I've been seeing is a guy who's out there every game competing, and even in games where he doesn't get a decision or doesn't have his best stuff, he is putting our team in a position to win every game that he starts, which is literally all you can ask of a 22-year-old rookie. Um, and then he freaking shoved this week against the Pirates. I think that was the Friday night start, right? When Bailey hit the walk-off, but through 6
Yeah,
innings, 7 Ks. And it's like, he's so impressive. And we were talking about it with Logan Webb kind of having this influence on the whole starting rotation. But this idea of like coming into the rotation and constantly tweaking and constantly kind of working on self improvement and just trying to be the best pitcher you can be now, but also developing. I'm just astounded by how good Harrison has been, even though the expectations were pretty high already on him, and just wanted to shout him out.
yeah, and I feel like what's crucial with him too is how much the other starters have stepped up this year. Because if it's, Webb, Harrison, and then Prey, then
Yeah.
the pressure situation is a lot different. And I think too, I was just reading Madison Bumgarner's scouting reports before he came into the league, and
Mm.
I don't know, I can't help but like they're different, but I can't help but think of Bum when I think about Harrison, just seeing him coming in from the left side, that kind of like lower slot, and it's all about the fastball with him, just like it was
Yeah.
with Bum. And it's not the fastest fastball that you've ever seen, but it's just the movement of it is such a special pitch. And I think you see um, what's nice about that pressure being relieved is now that he's in the league, he just like his first year was last year. It doesn't feel that way. It feels like he's been around forever, but he's 22. He has a ton of time to develop, and when pitchers stay in the league longer, this happened with all our guys from the 2010s, the Canes and
Yep.
the Timmies and everything. You get to stick around and you get the chance to compete, and then you add more and more pitches to your arsenal, and then all of a sudden, maybe that's just that one extra pitch, like win this year. I feel like, just like being able to rely on two things, not just that special fastball, but to like cut it with something else. It just makes such a big difference. So it's been great seeing him, and in general for the pitching staff, but for him specifically, I think keeping the walks down and bringing up the K rate is great. Like I think I love the ground ball stuff that we're doing, but what I'd love to see from him is high strikeout rates all the
Yeah.
time. I'll take slightly less innings for just like keeping people off the base paths, because with him, I think right now there's still that kind of a little homer prone thing.
Yeah.
So just keeping runners off the base pass is huge, and he did that in such a huge way in the last
Yeah.
game. So I'm
I'm
glad to talk about
astounded by how few walks he's given up this year.
it.
It's
Yeah,
just, it's unreal for someone who was kind of pegged at this as this, stuff over control guy. And he's come into the big leagues and he's been a control over stuff guy.
yeah,
Um, and I think you mentioned Roger Munter, and I want to shout him out as well, because he talks about how development is never linear. And for a lot of guys, you develop
yeah,
at the major league level. Logan Webb um, came into the major leagues as a four seam fastball and a slider guy. And now he's a sinker, changeup, slider guy. And
Yeah.
he didn't have a sinker when he made his debut. And so we're going to see Kyle Harrison go through kind of different iterations of his pitch mix. And I've seen it this last start. He threw like 20 some changeups and they were looking really good. And if he's able to develop a good changeup,
Yeah.
that fastball is going to play even better than it already is. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, to your point too, like this is the influence of Webb and him like spending the offseason together.
yep,
Webb's a competitor, obviously, and that's what we love about him, but he also doesn't like let what's happening on the field too much affect his performance. He's still gonna go out there and try to compete every pitch, but it's not a thing of like, oh fuck, I just walked this guy and it's all going to shit now and like whatever, and then a meltdown happening. It's like, no, you're a starter. You're supposed to be out there at least 6 innings, and it's like clockwork this week. We've gotten 6 innings from everybody. I think now might be a good time to take a quick break, and we'll come back and do a little question and answer. See you soon.
we are back from our break. We once again will not tell you how long our break was, nor what we did during this time.
Call in 415-703 something something and tell us how long you think our break was. And if you get it right, I don't know.
I love that you are always saying call in 415-703 because I'm almost positive our voicemail starts with 415-320. But I like the bit.
It is that. It's 320-7269. That's what it is.
There it is. Nice. All right. Question and answer time. So first question of the day is we were talking about kind of the 2010s vibes to this iteration of the Giants, which I'd argue is the most kind of 2010s feeling that we've had since like 2017.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do a little fun exercise. We can go back and forth on this, but comparing current Giants pitchers to a 2010s or that era Giants pitcher. Yeah. Do you have a comparison in mind? You want to start with one and I'll go and we'll kind of go back and forth.
The Bumgarner Harrison thing is just right there. Just the lefty-ness of it. This is going to be a weird point, but like I look at Harrison now and like I know that like in 6 years I'm gonna be looking back at like a picture of him in the league right now versus like him then, and I'll be like, wasn't it funny when he was just like such a little baby like back then? Like Bumgarner looked like such a child when he came up, but then by the end of it, obviously he's a scary man,
a grizzled veteran.
And I think as long as Kyle stays away from the motorbikes, I think he'll be just fine in this league. So I think that's my first one.
I love that. I want to give a comparison. You and I've talked about a ton. Is the Logan Webb and Matt Cain comp? I feel like Logan Webb is just the evolved Pokemon of Matt Cain, and you can't convince me they don't have some distant relatives. They have too many physical similarities to me. But yeah, just that like horse, that guy who just like, gives you innings, doesn't necessarily strike out the whole world, but is just so reliable. There are a couple starts Logan Webb's had where it's like, could he take a no-hitter into this game? Like he starts getting just weak grounder after weak grounder, and it's like, man, he's at 40 pitches after like 4 innings. Like, could this be the one? And then he gives up like a blue pit, and you're like, damn, I really think that had the chance. So yeah, shout out Perfect Game Kane and his doppelganger Jesse Plemons / Logan Webb.
I think it's only a matter of time too before he gets one. Like it's going to happen. So also shout out to him for cheating a little bit by starting Mustache May early. I see you, Logan. Nobody's talking about it, but I see you, and it looks good to be honest. But
Logan's like, I needed to get a head start. It's gonna be Mustache
honestly,
June for Logan if he didn't.
Well, maybe he can get a transplant from Slater's disgusting thing that he's got going on. Um, but um, uh, I want to talk about Jordan Hicks now.
Jordan Hicks reminds me, or makes me think of if Tim Lincecum and Ryan Vogelsong had a baby.
Mm.
I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm not
And
gonna
Ryan
explain that.
Vogelsong was secretly black.
No, I like that a lot. Blake Snell is giving off big time Jonathan Sanchez and Barry Zito energy. And that is not necessarily a compliment, but it speaks to maybe not the best start to his Giants career, but I think there's a clutch moment in there, and there's a big moment for him coming at some point. But I don't think Giants fans need an explanation for why he reminds me of Barry Zito right now. Might have to do with a big contract and not pitching very well. But yeah, I have confidence Blake Snell can be a Giants legend still.
Yeah, yeah. Who do you think for good old Keaton?
I don't have a good one, honestly. He gives me like very slight Johnny Cueto vibes with the like, but he's not like 2010s, I guess, or like he's 2010s adjacent. Not a 2010s pick either, but he really reminds me sometimes of Jason Schmidt, who was the first ace of our lifetimes.
Wait, are we
Yeah.
forgiving Jason Schmidt in 2024, or
Oh,
are we thinking about his Dodgers 10 years
1000%.
old?
He was so bad as a Dodger. He's a Giants legend for that.
No, that's the correct answer. That's the correct answer.
Great. That was fun. Next question. So we mentioned Blake Snell, who currently on the IL. It looks like they caught this. It's like a groin strain. Caught it somewhat early, so he should be back around kind of mid-May. The interesting thing, and we were on this with Mike Yastrzemski, Blake Snell's wife is about to have a child. Due date's like kind of May 20th range, I think. So might be interesting to kind of see when he actually makes his debut or not debut because he's already pitched. I'm trying to forget that he's already pitched for us, but but it'll be interesting to see when he returns. But in his absence for the next month, how do you think we're going to cover innings?
That little doc about the pitching that the Giants put out on their YouTube or whatever before the season, the kind of hype puff piece thing.
Loved it.
Mason Black was in there. Like that was the guy that they were penciling in number 5, and so far in 2024, he's 2-1 with a 119 ERA, 0.93 WHIP, 25 strikeouts in 22 innings, and so for me,
that's
I feel
basically
bad for...
like throwing a perfect game in AAA. The PCL is Homer Fest. I mean, that's super impressive.
And I think, he was knocking on the door in spring training. I mean, he was basically there. And with all love to Dalton Jeffries, like, I don't know how much it's worth, like, maintaining that 40-man spot for him. I feel like you've got to give him a shot, in my opinion. I think, shout out to Mitch White, Giants legend, but I think I'd much rather see Black get a shot than try to bullpen it again. I think that the bullpenning thing, it was just a function of like the late scratch from Snell. So I don't really, it was basically a mulligan in my mind. But I mean, all the other positions, all the other slots in the rotation right now are solid. So I say throw Black out there. And even if he struggles, I mean, I'd rather see him get a few turns through and just see what he can do. And Snell, man, like, take your time, bro. Like, it's honestly not worth like having him on the field if he's not going to be ready to pitch. And I know that he still is going to turn it on at some point this year. But like until then, like, deal with your kid, figure out whatever like technically you need to figure it out. Maybe take a break from the video games, go into nature. We've got some great nature in the Bay Area. Touch grass, Mike. Do you have any thoughts for inning covering?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm 100% with you. I'm actually a little annoyed that, and again, shout out to Bellarmine Prep legend Mitch White. And I'm glad he's on the Giants, but I would have much rather just seen us add Mason Black to the 40 man. And I think
Yeah.
the fact that he's not yet, um, service time eligibility or, all that stuff, I think that's playing a factor, that we can keep him down in the minors without, um, adding adding him to the roster full time. But like you said, I think it's time. He's earned it. He, before we signed Snell, was pretty much our fifth starter. So I don't think anything needs to change there. And I would imagine the Giants agree with us. I just think they're going to wait until the day that Snell's turn comes up,
Yeah.
which should be tomorrow. We're recording Tuesday before the game against the Sox. Webb's on the mound tonight, and I think Snell would be next. So by the time this comes out, maybe there's an announcement that Mason Black pitches, because I went to the game, the bullpen game. Ryan Walker, solid as ever. Sean Jelly looked really good until Lindor hit a curveball at his feet for a home run, and it kind of, kind of messed with Jelly. But I think Jelly is a reliever. I'm happy with
Yeah.
him in our bullpen, but I don't think he should be someone, even like a bulk innings guy. I think he's a maybe 1.5 innings type guy for us, but he starts to get hit around a little bit after a couple innings. So,
Yeah.
and Mitch
And
White, we'll see. Yeah.
I think importantly too, like Black threw 123 innings last year and
Yeah.
112 the year before. And, obviously in traditional baseball parlance, that's not like a ton of innings, but for what we need right now, that's like, I think we'd be happy with some of those guys getting to around that 130 mark. I think that's Hicks' plainly stated goal is like, that's the minimum. And then after that, we'll see
Clear
what
130. Yeah.
happens. Yeah. So I just feel like you just know that you can get some length out of him and it's worthwhile. And two, like I kind of wanted to mention this when we were talking about the starters earlier, but is it too early to start giving some flowers to Brian Price? I mean,
Ooh,
how much can we attribute to him and what he's done with the staff this year? I mean, I I hadn't really thought about him much until I saw him in the dugout standing next to Melvin. And I'm like, huh, it's interesting what you've done here. He took a big project in Hicks, and I'm sure he's had a role in talking about pitch selection and stuff like that. And, when we saw it last year, but he's definitely taken a step up this year as well.
yep.
Harrison's slowly coming along. I just feel like a guy like him, I don't know, it kind of it's almost too easy, these comps, but it's like he has a Rigetti-ish kind of thing
He
to
does.
him, like to Melvin Spochi. So it's been really nice to see that. I do want to take this one moment to be a bit of a complainer and say that I felt very strongly this offseason that Shota Imanaga was a guy,
You
and
did.
he signed for what, 354 or something crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, with the posting fees, but man, how good has he looked, and
I
how much
know.
better would this team be with him instead of Snell?
I know. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, but
It's tough.
hindsight's 2020. But I just feels like what a bargain that is. Like that's almost like less than Snell's contract if he opts in for next year, which is kind of insane. But
Right. Over 3 years,
thankfully,
not 2. Yeah.
yeah. But it's just like you know, you win some and you lose some. But Snell, there's time yet. But I'm not
Yeah.
too worried about it. I will
I'm
say
not either.
that Cobb's delay in his rehab and recovery has thrown a little bit of a wrinkle into this. I think thinking that he was going to be back in May, early May, maybe even April, I think made it a lot easier to weather the storm of Snell not
Weather
being
the empty
available.
storm, some may even say.
If
It's a
you get
deep
that
cut for like
reference,
3 people out there.
if you get that reference, turn this podcast off right now. But I, but I think now that it's a little bit more of a question mark when he's going to come back. If we can stay competitive 4 out of 5 days, and then Mason Black can get in there, I think we'll be totally fine.
I agree. Is there any chance Landon Roop is a bulk innings guy or starts games?
I don't know what we do with him. I mean,
I'm
I
kind of in
I
the
think
same boat.
I almost feel like he should be getting regular innings, and so if that's not going to be at the major league level which it hasn't really been lately, then I mean, I guess I'd probably just send him back down. But um, I also think too with him. Speaking of innings, I mean, he's got zero under his
4
belt
innings a
essentially.
year, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he's a guy that like I'd love to force the issue this year, like
Yeah.
come the second half of the season, if he's still being that guy, then it's like immediate add to the rotation. But I'd put him like my ideal scenario for him is kind of like same timeline as like Luciano and Matos and them, like
Hmm.
give them this year to like force the issue maybe, and then if not, hit the ground running next year, stretched
Yeah.
out, ready to go for me.
And similar to the Luciano and Matos kind of comp is like when an injury dictates, he's up. That injury dictated for opening day. So that's why we saw
Yeah.
Roop immediately. But yeah, I agree. I also I'm skeptical that he is a starter for us. And in a good way. That's not an
Yeah.
indictment on him specifically, but I think his sinker curveball combo works really nicely out of the bullpen. Um, Not only do we have Wynn, Harrison, Hicks, and Webb kind of locked up for a while, but we've got Wizenhunt, we've got Birdsong, we've been talking about Mason Black. We've got young starters who I think should already be ahead of him in the pecking order because of their innings and just like
Yeah.
larger repertoire. So if that's, for this year being kind of a long reliever guy who comes in the sixth inning for us or mop up duty. We saw that a little bit with Tristan Beck and Keaton Wynn last year, that like having a rookie reliever or kind of rookie swingman type come in and be that like mop up guy can actually be really helpful to like get you kind of confidence and get you going. But he's had a couple rough outings recently. So I do wonder if the rough outings continue, if it'd just be better to have him continue his development down in the minors. But
Yeah. He seems like he seems like a guy that we could like that would one day be like a Cy Young candidate on the Rays or something. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like just like a
absolutely.
kind of guy, like I don't know what his future is like gonna be in this organization, what his role ultimately will be. But I like him a lot, and I mean, if his destiny is to get us somebody that we need at the deadline, maybe some offensive help or something, then I don't know. I think I'd have to at least talk about it. Um, but I think when it comes to innings too, the last thing I want to say is my concern is less so on the front end and more on the back end, because we've got some guys pitching well, as you mentioned. Ryan Walker has been good this year. Camilo is Camilo, but at the same time, I feel like watching the Pirates series, like we have, I don't know, really re we're just throwing Walker and Doval out there a lot, and it kind of is bringing me back um, to Kapler, um,
Yeah,
and his usage of them. And I think it's really important that we establish some of those guys, whether that be Eric Miller or Luke Jackson or Roop or one of the Rod. I mean, Tyler's been okay. Taylor's been a little here and there, but we need to like get that 7, 8, 9 flow down a little bit stronger, because we've got 6 innings taken care of right now. So it's really
right.
bridging that gap and making sure that we keep it locked down and, be able to rest Camilo, like have somebody else
Yeah,
take a save for him if he's pitched 3 days in a row, because then we're in the same situation as the latter half of the season and he's gassed and Ryan Walker's
right.
gassed and then we're out of bullets. So um
I
I
think
love to
that's a
see
good
the
point.
yeah,
Yeah, because
go ahead.
I think Kapler was really intentional about his usage of Doval, and still by last year ran him into the ground a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but I think there was more of an adherence to, you know, you've pitched 2 games in a row. We're not pitching you this game.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Camilo pitched all 3 games of the Pirates series.
I think
Um,
so.
and, he hasn't pitched a ton this year. So I think if there was ever a time to do that, now is the time. We had an off day or yesterday. Who knows what his, deployment's going to be in this Red Sox series. But yeah, it's something to monitor for sure because I'm not ready to talk about it, but I am a little slightly concerned about Bob Melvin's bullpen usage, and so far that's one of the things that I've missed about Kapler compared to Melvin in an
Yeah.
otherwise seamless transition, and I've enjoyed the Bob Melvin experience. But I also think there's not an obvious closer when Camilo is resting. So
Right.
I can also understand the motivation as we're trying to climb back up to 500 and over 500. So yeah, one of those things that's going
Yeah.
to kind of work itself out. But
Yeah.
um,
I think let's check back in on that in a future episode for sure. Um I think it's been wild. It's been a month of Giants baseball so far. We've got a month of baseball in the books. We've learned a lot, and I think there's still a lot more to learn. The Giants have a um, big road trip coming up here: Boston, Philly, and then the Rockies, the powerhouse. Before they come back
it'll be
for
tough.
another homestand. Yeah,
This is going to be a tough road trip. It's never easy to finish a road trip in Denver, regardless of how poor the
yeah,
Rockies are playing. And then Boston's been really good, although really banged up. And Philly has been playing some of the best baseball in the majors, and their pitching staff has been even better than ours in some ways. So yeah, it'll be a good test. We'll see how it goes. What's either a prediction or just kind of a hope for how we finish this, or yeah, how we end up on this 10 game roadie?
three
Yeah.
against Boston, four against Philly, three against the Rockies.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, if we can get 2 wins in Boston, two in Philly, and
And two,
two
two, two,
against the
two.
Rockies, I want to say three, but just Rockies fuck shit happens in Denver
Yeah,
and just things happen. So
we've been
I
better
think if
in
we could
Denver
go,
lately, but it's a house of horrors sometimes for us.
yeah, exactly. So I guess that's if we could go 6-4, that would be a great
Oh,
road trip to me.
I would be so pleased. I would be okay with 4-6 too, if I'm being totally honest. Um, just getting out, not hurting ourselves, but yeah, just getting out with bodies intact, making sure
Yeah,
we're still healthy after the road trip, and yeah,
yeah.
but
I think the Phillies obviously are always these days going to be in playoff contention. The Red Sox, it's remains to be seen yet if it's for real, but they're solidly above 500 right now, and playing in a tough division. So um, I think this is important. It's more important that we play well than that we necessarily are stacking up wins on this road trip. Like I just want to see us be competitive at every stop. Let's keep the pitching stuff going as much as possible. Let's bring up Black, and let's lock it down at the end of the lineups too. I think that some of these pitchers on the Red Sox, I feel a big offensive game coming up for us against the Red Sox and the Phillies. I mean, probably the other best rotation in baseball the last week of things happening. So let's just get some runs on the board. But it'll be a good one. I will not be in Boston as I thought that I might be for this
mm,
series, but I'm looking forward to it. And thank you for joining us on another episode of Foggy with a Chance of Seagulls. As always, call in to 4 and 5 3
730,
two
oh no, 320.
7 2 6 9. No, honestly, don't. At this point, I'm pissed at you. You've been
Yeah.
listening and you've not been calling. Just kidding. No, I'm very grateful. Also, we don't always mention this, but rating and reviewing us on Spotify or
Mm.
Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, just whatever you think we deserve. It helps us just reach a bigger audience. There's a lot of other schmucks trying to do the same thing that we're doing. So any any help you can give us is appreciated. And we will see you very soon for another episode of Foggy with a Chance of Seagulls.